Hello, this is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is 23 December 2024. Welcome to the podcast. Today I want to talk about the U.S. government policy on immigration. So this is podcast 2 of 3. This one is titled The Trump Administration Coming Up versus the Courts. Now, as promised, I want to talk again about subscribing to my channel and referring these videos to other people. So last week I was talking about if the Trump administration can deport people. So please listen to that one. So let's dig in here. So there's a couple of things to talk about. The first one is there is a directive called Immigration and Nationality Act. I'm going to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about 2 examples where the current president and the former president used the power to get people out of the country. And they were challenged by the courts. As you have seen in the news the last several weeks after the election, there is going to be a big fight over getting illegal immigrants out of the United States. So, like I said, I started with the deportations, things that the mainstream media is not going to tell you. Like I always say, they're at a higher level or they only want you to know certain things. So, as I previously stated, there's the Immigration and Nationality Act. And it says that the President of the United States has the authority to suspend the entry of certain non-citizens into the United States under certain circumstances. Specifically, the section reads. Now, I read this first part because this is an article that I found. And like I keep saying, a lot of these articles are just biased and it's hard to get to the meat of it. So the meat of what this is saying is that under Section 212F, the president finds that the entry of any aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. He may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Now, that's what it says, okay? But next sentence, people are already reading into it, meaning the courts. And the courts have done a couple of things on this. So if we look at the other section of it, it says, does not allow the president to interfere with or subvert other parts of the INA or other federal laws, right? Which grants people the right to seek asylum in the United States. Now, both of those things are important, right? Because these are the interpretations. So I just read you when I started with whenever the president find that entry of any aliens, that's straight from that section that is part of the law for the power of the president of the United States to suspend entry. Now, we've made this whole thing very complicated with illegal immigration and deporting people. And that's why you hear the politicians arguing about it, going back and forth, and all of those types of things, right? So there are some examples that I wanted to get into. Now, the first one is the Biden example. So he suspended the entry of non-citizens who have affiliation with a group that the U.S. government opposes or who are engaged in objectionable conduct. Some examples include suspending the entry of certain immigrants and non-immigrants who immigration officials determined to be enabling corruption. Bottom line on that, as you know, the last 15 years or so, probably longer, we have people who we have allowed in the country based on oppression in the other country, wars, and the like. And they come into the United States, and all of a sudden, they're advocating for the country that they left. So in this case, President Biden put them on notice that they could be deported. Now, the next example is from the Trump administration. Use this authority more broadly, okay? So there's a little bit of bias when they say more broadly, to execute several large-scale restrictions on entry of non-citizens. So in a series of orders known collectively as the Muslim ban or the travel ban, President Trump used his authority to ban the entry of people from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Now, we remember that. But then the courts weighed in and they limited it to them not being able to come into the country 90 days. And then they exempted, further on down the line, they exempted those with green cards and added restrictions on North Koreans and certain Venezuelan government officials. Now, why am I talking about these two examples? The courts have weighed in on these two examples that I have told you about. And what that means is, starting in January, when the new administration comes in, there's going to be all kinds of issues played out in court. And it looks like that people coming into the country, because we haven't switched to the new administration yet, they've got cover because the courts are allowing or interpreting the law that limits the power of the president to say, hey, we're in danger because of this from illegal aliens, and we need to get them out of the country. Now, the mainstream media, as usual, is not talking about this, and this is going to be a huge issue from the respect of, first of all, getting it through the courts is going to be lengthy, and then all people are not going to fit the same profile of people that they need to get out of the country. And the courts are going to slow roll it in a lot of the cases, especially if you're in California, Arizona, and New Mexico. Probably on the East Coast, the courts will allow, say like in New York City, it might be a little easier for them to characterize the instructions or the directive from the president to get people out of the country. Now, here is the other issue, and it's been on the news that a lot of senior judges are not returned because the Trump administration is getting ready to come into the executive office. Now, under Section 2112, like I stated earlier, if you read what it says, the president has the power. The court's job is to interpret what is written, not to add to it or tell you what they think that it means. And if you look at these two examples I've given you from past presidents, it's been the same way. The courts tear it apart, and then before we know it, we make no progress whatsoever. And like I told you with the deportations, the first individuals that are illegal in the country are going to be criminals. And like I stated before, we should be able to get the criminals out now. Why aren't we doing that? Now, in podcast 3, I'm going to talk about that and a couple of other things. So, now the last thing that I want to mention is that President-elect Trump said that they want to amend the 14th Amendment. What the 14th Amendment says currently is that it guarantees that every child born within the jurisdiction of the United States is a U.S. citizen, regardless of their parents' immigration or citizenship status. Okay, so U.S. citizenship automatically to anyone born on U.S. soil. Anti-immigrant political factions, however, have pushed to restrict birthright citizenship to deny it to children born in the United States to undocumented immigrant parents. So they are very specific. If you watch the news, they'll just tell you that they're trying to say that anyone that comes into the United States and then has a child, their child is not a citizen. They are very specific here, so you have to wonder why they're not telling you that it's only for undocumented immigrant parents, because there are people here legally, but they blur the lines for whatever reason so that people can stand up and shout and say, no, I've been here, I should be here, you're picking on me, I'm here legally. Now, this is where we're going to start, and the courts are going to have to weigh in on this too. And if I had to guess, the immigration laws are 1,000 pages, so good luck with reading through them. And what I'm trying to do is give you the top portion of the power of the president of the United States, because the incoming administration has already said that this is where they want to start at. They want to deport people. So podcast 2, the courts are going to be heavily involved. So like I said, please subscribe to my podcast and pass it on to someone else. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Tell me what you think.